The stars looked beautiful tonight, but Captain Zeltis knew better than to trust beauty in space. His merchant ship moved slowly through the asteroid field, carrying precious metals from the mining colonies. The ship's hull reflected the distant sunlight like a piece of colored glass. Everything seemed peaceful and quiet. Zeltis had been a trader for 17 years. He knew these routes better than anyone. His crew of 6 people worked smoothly together. They had made this journey dozens of times before without any problems. The cargo hold was full of valuable minerals that would bring good prices at the core worlds. Then the alarms started screaming. 5 ships appeared out of nowhere, surrounding them in a perfect circle. These were not friendly vessels. These were Kragath hunter ships, and everyone in the galaxy knew what that meant. The hunters were pirates who killed everyone they met. They took everything and left nothing behind. Their ships were covered in weapons and metal claws designed to rip other ships apart. Zeltis felt his hearts beating fast with fear. His people had 3 hearts each, and right now all 3 were pounding. His communications officer, Myrn, turned to look at him. Her purple face showed the terror she felt. The merchant ship had no weapons. They had no way to fight back. Their engines were damaged from passing through the asteroid field, so they could not jump away to safety. The biggest hunter ship sent them a message. The voice was harsh and full of clicking sounds. It told them to surrender everything and prepare to be boarded. If they resisted, they would be killed immediately. But Zeltis knew the truth. Even if they surrendered, the Kragath would kill them anyway. These pirates enjoyed causing pain and suffering. The hunter ships moved closer. Their weapons started glowing with power. Long tubes extended from their sides, ready to attach to the merchant ship. The crew watched their screens in horror, knowing they had only minutes left to live. Then something unexpected happened. A new signal appeared on their sensors. A single ship came out from behind a large asteroid. It was small, much smaller than the hunter ships. It moved with incredible speed and grace, flying straight toward the circle of enemy vessels. The newcomer positioned itself right between the merchant ship and the nearest hunter. Myrn checked the identification signal and made a surprised sound. The ship was sending out a clear message in standard galactic language. It said, "Human Federation Patrol Vessel Ranger, Commander Jake Morrison commanding." Zeltis had heard stories about humans. Most species in the galaxy had heard about them by now. They were the newest race to achieve faster than light travel. That had only happened 30 years ago. What made humans special? What made them scary to some people was their complete refusal to give up. They never accepted when they were outmatched. They called it bravery. Other species called it crazy. A voice came over the communication channel. It spoke in surprisingly good galactic standard language. "This is Commander Morrison of the Ranger. You are breaking the law in Federation-protected space. Power down your weapons and leave immediately." The Kragath response was exactly what Zeltis expected. Laughter. Harsh, ugly laughter echoed across all the frequencies. 5 big warships against 1 small patrol craft. The human ship was maybe 1/10 their size. The situation was ridiculous. The human had to know he was going to die. But the Ranger did not run away. Instead, it started sending out something else. Music. Loud, aggressive music with a heavy beat. Human voices screamed words about standing your ground and fighting back. Zeltis would learn later that humans called this type of music rock and roll. They often played it before going into battle. The hunters stopped laughing when the Ranger opened fire. The first shot hit the nearest hunter ship right in its weapon systems. Explosions bloomed across its hull like flowers of fire. The human ship moved so fast it seemed to blur on the sensors. It dove under another hunter ship, flying so close that the 2 vessels almost touched. More weapons fire tore into the hunter's belly, hitting weak spots that should not have been easy to reach. The other hunter ships tried to surround the human vessel. They moved into a formation that should have trapped it in their crossfire. But Morrison was already moving again. His ship spun and twisted through space in ways that seemed impossible. Plasma bolts from the hunters passed through empty space where the Ranger had been just seconds before. Zeltis watched in amazement. The human was fighting like no one he had ever seen. Traditional space combat was slow and methodical. Ships stayed at safe distances and traded shots until one side won through superior firepower. But this human was fighting like he was dancing. Every movement was precise and calculated, but also wild and unpredictable. "How is he surviving those maneuvers?" Myrn asked, staring at her screen. The forces involved should crush any living being. Zelthus remembered what he had read about humans. They came from a world with very strong gravity. Their bodies had evolved to handle forces that would kill most other species. Their blood could carry more oxygen. Their bones were denser. Their muscles were stronger. Evolution had made them tough in ways that seemed wasteful, until moments like this. The Ranger fired a spread of missiles that split apart into dozens of smaller warheads. The hunter ships tried to shoot them down, but there were too many targets. Explosions rippled across two ships, destroying their sensor equipment and communication dishes. The neat formation the hunters had created fell apart. Each ship now tried to hit the human craft on its own. Morrison's voice came over the channel again. This time he sounded almost cheerful. Ranger to merchant vessel. You need to move about 2 kilometers to your right. Things are about to get messy where you are now. Zelthus did not waste time asking questions. He ordered his helmsmen to fire their damaged engines and move the ship to a safer position. Behind them, the Ranger launched what looked like every torpedo it had all at once. The missiles streaked through space toward the hunter ships like a swarm of angry insects. 2 of the hunter ships suddenly turned and ran. Their crews had realized they were not hunting prey anymore. They were being hunted. The predators had become the victims. They fled into faster-than-light speed, abandoning their companions. 3 hunter ships remained. The largest one, the leader, began charging its main weapon. This was a massive plasma cannon designed to destroy space stations. It took a long time to charge, but once it fired, nothing could survive the blast. The Ranger did not run away from this deadly weapon. Instead, it flew straight toward it. At the last possible second, Morrison released clouds of metal chaff and bright flares. At the same time, he shut down all power to his ship. The Ranger went completely dark and cold. It tumbled through space like a piece of broken debris. The massive plasma bolt passed within meters of the human ship. The weapon's sensors could not lock onto a target that had no heat or power signature. Before the hunters could figure out what happened, the Ranger's systems came back online. Now it was inside their defensive circle, too close for their big weapons to target properly. Morrison's close-range guns tore into the lead ship's bridge with perfect accuracy. The last 2 hunters broke formation and fled into faster-than-light speed. Silence fell over the battlefield. Zelthus and his crew sat in their chairs, unable to process what they had just witnessed. 1 small human patrol craft had faced 5 hunter warships and won, not through better weapons or stronger shields, but through pure skill and courage. Morrison's voice crackled over the communication system one more time. Merchant vessel, this is Ranger. Sorry about the rough show. Do you folks need an escort to the nearest station? The trip to Station Kepler 7 took 3 days. During all that time, the Ranger stayed close to the damaged merchant ship. Commander Jake Morrison kept checking on them regularly, making sure they were okay. He offered advice about fixing their engines like he had worked on 100 different types of ships before. He even shared some of his food supplies with them, though he warned them that human food might taste strange. He was right about that. The food was incredibly strong and spicy. It had concentrated nutrients that were almost too much for the Zolari crew to handle, but they appreciated the gesture. What surprised Zelthus most was how casual Morrison seemed about everything. The human showed no concern at all about what he had done. When Zelthus asked about the battle, Morrison just shrugged and said he had handled worse situations during training exercises. The way he talked about facing 5 enemy ships made it sound like a normal day at work. This told Zelthus a lot about human military training. They did not just accept danger. They seemed to look for it as a way to prove themselves. On the second day, Myrn finally got brave enough to ask the question everyone was thinking. Commander Morrison, why did you help us? We are not part of the Human Federation. You had no reason to risk your life for us. Morrison's answer was simple and direct. You were in trouble. That is reason enough. Those words stayed with Zelthus. Most species in the galaxy did not think that way. They calculated costs and benefits. They considered alliances and treaties. They asked what they would get in return for helping. But this human had seen strangers in danger and immediately decided to help. No questions asked. Now Station Kepler 7 was growing larger on their view screens. The station was a neutral trading post where dozens of different species did business together. News about what happened had already spread through the communication networks. Automated beacons throughout the sector had picked up the Ranger's identification signal and the battle data. When they docked at the station, A huge crowd was waiting. Representatives from many different species wanted to see the human who had single-handedly driven away a pack of Kragath hunters. Station security was there too, led by a four-armed Greln captain named Vortex. Morrison came out of the Ranger wearing a simple blue flight suit. It had patches showing his rank and which branch of the military he served in. He was tall for a human, with short brown hair and a lean build that came from years of living in changing gravity. His face looked weathered but young, probably only about 30 years old if Zelthus understood human aging correctly. "Commander Morrison," Vortex said in his deep, rumbling voice, "your actions have caused quite a situation. The Kragath hunters are demanding payment for their damaged ships. They say you attacked them without any good reason." Morrison raised one eyebrow. Zelthus had learned this expression meant the human was skeptical or amused. They surrounded a civilian ship with weapons powered up and boarding tubes ready to attach. That is clearly piracy under Galactic Convention 12. I would be happy to show my tactical recordings to any court they want. A Kragath representative pushed through the crowd. Its hard-shell body clicked with anger. "You destroyed our ships. You killed our warriors. This is an act of war against our clan." "Your warriors were trying to murder civilians," Morrison replied in a calm, even tone. "If that counts as an act of war, then your entire species has been at war with the galaxy for the past 100 years. I'm happy to make it official if you want." Complete silence fell over the station. Nobody talked to the Kragath like that. They were too dangerous and unpredictable. But Morrison stood there with his hands relaxed at his sides, showing absolutely no fear. After a long moment, the Kragath representative backed away. It retreated into the crowd, making angry clicking sounds. Vortex cleared his throat. "The station administration wants to thank you for protecting one of our registered merchants. We would also like to invite you to a formal reception tonight." Morrison smiled. "I appreciate the offer, but I need to file my patrol report and get back to my route. Pirates do not take days off." As the human turned to walk back to his ship, Zelthus called out, "Commander Morrison, my crew and I owe you our lives. If there is ever anything we can do to repay this debt—" "No debt," Morrison interrupted gently. "Just pay it forward. Help someone else when they need it. That is how we build something better out here." Zelthus watched the human walk back to his small patrol craft. This warrior who fought like a demon but talked like a wise teacher. All around the station, other beings watched too. Zelthus could see them thinking and calculating behind their eyes. Humanity was new to galactic society. They had limited territory, a small fleet, and fewer resources than the older species. But they had something else, something that could not be measured in ships or weapons. They had the kind of courage that made predators think twice about attacking. The galaxy was going to have to adjust to these humans. Zelthus suspected that adjustment would be difficult and painful for those who preyed on the weak. Later that evening, Zelthus sat in his quarters writing his official report. He tried to describe what he had seen, but words felt inadequate. How do you explain the way Morrison had flown his ship? How do you capture the feeling of watching someone face impossible odds without hesitation? Myrn came to his door.
"Captain, I have been reading about humans."
"Did you know their homeworld is considered extremely dangerous by galactic standards? The gravity is much stronger than most inhabited worlds. The atmosphere has high oxygen levels that would be toxic to many species. The weather patterns are violent and unpredictable. Even the native animals are unusually aggressive." "That explains a lot," Zelthus said quietly. "There is more," Myrn continued. "Humans evolved as persistence hunters. On their world, they would chase prey for hours or even days until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. They did not have the speed or strength of their prey, but they simply refused to give up. They would keep going no matter what." Zelthus thought about Morrison flying into certain death without hesitation. They brought that same attitude to space. "Yes," Myrn agreed. "And I think that terrifies some species. The Kragath rule through fear and violence. But how do you frighten a species that does not know when to be afraid? How do you intimidate someone who sees 5-to-1 odds as acceptable?" It was a good question. Zelthus did not have an answer. Over the next few days, more stories reached the station. Other human patrol craft had engaged pirates in different sectors. Not all the battles went as well as Morrison's fight, but in every case the humans had fought with the same fierce determination. Even when outmatched, even when retreat would have been the logical choice, they stood their ground and protected civilians. The merchant guilds were starting to take notice. Several organizations approached Zelthus about forming convoys that would travel under human protection. The humans needed resources and trade goods from across the galaxy. Merchants needed protection from pirates. It seemed like a fair exchange. But it was more than just business. It was a fundamental shift in how things worked. For centuries, the strong had preyed on the weak in the outer sectors. Pirates like the Krageth had operated freely because no one was willing to stop them. The cost was too high, the risk too great. Now humans were changing that equation. They were willing to pay the cost and take the risk. Not for profit or territory, but simply because it was the right thing to do. Zeltis accepted the invitation to speak at the Trade Commission hearing. He also accepted the offer to join the new protected merchant fleet. Morrison had told him to pay it forward, to help others when they needed it. This was how he could do that, by being part of a system that made space safer for everyone. Before the merchant ship left the station, Zeltis sent a message to the Ranger. It was brief and simple. "Thank you for showing us what courage looks like." "We will not forget," Morrison's reply came back quickly. "Just doing my job. Stay safe out there, just doing my job." As if saving lives and changing the balance of power in the galaxy was routine work. Maybe for humans it was. 3 weeks after the incident in the asteroid field, the entire galaxy was still talking about Commander Jake Morrison and the Ranger. Military academies everywhere had analyzed the tactical data from the battle. Strategists studied the recordings over and over, unable to believe what they were seeing. The mathematics worked out correctly, but it should not have been possible. The maneuvers required a combination of skill, perfect timing, and pure courage that most species simply did not have. On the Krageth homeworld of Drakkar Prime, the High Clan Council met in their war chamber. The walls were decorated with skulls from defeated enemies and pieces of destroyed ships. For 300 years, the Krageth had controlled the outer sectors through fear and violence. Now their dominance was being questioned. "One ship," Warlord Kreth snarled, his jaw parts clicking with fury. "One human in one ship beat 5 of our hunters. This cannot be allowed. It makes us look weak." "It makes us look weak because we were weak," another council member said. "The battle recordings are clear. Our captains fought according to our standard procedures. They maintained proper formations and followed all normal combat rules. The human ignored everything and just attacked from directions we did not expect. Then we must adapt," Kreth growled. "We study their methods. We find their weaknesses." "That is the problem," a third voice said. This was Vesh, the clan's intelligence officer. "We have been gathering information about human military abilities since they entered space. The more we learn, the more worried we become." This Morrison was not special by their standards. He was just a patrol officer, middle rank, flying a standard ship. If this is their normal capability, we need to rethink our plans for expanding into human areas. The council chamber became silent. The Krageth had built their empire on the idea that aggression and superior numbers always won. But humans seemed to work on a completely different principle. They treated impossible odds as normal training exercises. Meanwhile, on the diplomatic station Unity 1, a very different conversation was happening. Ambassador Linda Carter of the Human Federation sat across from representatives of many species. There were Zellari merchants, Greln leaders, and delegates from a dozen other civilizations. "We appreciate what Commander Morrison did," the Zellari representative said, "but his actions have created a diplomatic problem. The Krageth claim human aggression. Some sectors want to restrict where human ships can patrol." Linda smiled, but it was not a warm smile. She was a career diplomat who had spent 20 years handling first contact situations. She knew how to handle political games. With respect, the Krageth can claim whatever they want. The tactical recordings are public. Commander Morrison encountered active piracy and responded according to both human military rules and the Galactic Convention on Protecting Civilian Ships. If the Krageth want to argue that stopping murder and theft is aggression, I am happy to have that debate in front of the Galactic Council. "The issue is not about legality," the Grellan ambassador said in his deep voice. "It is about the message this sends. One human ship defeating 5 Krageth hunters suggests a military power that many species find concerning. You are a young civilization. Some worry about what you will do with that kind of power." Linda leaned forward. "Here is what we will do with it. We will protect civilians who cannot protect themselves. We will patrol trade routes that everyone else thinks are too dangerous. We will stand between predators and their prey. That is not a threat. That is a promise. And if someone decides to test that promise," another ambassador asked, If a major power decides humanity needs to be reminded of its place, then they will learn the same lesson the Kragath learned, Linda replied calmly. We do not start fights, but we finish them. Back in human-controlled space aboard the Federation carrier Washington, Admiral Frank Hayes reviewed the Morrison incident with his command staff. The conference room was filled with officers from different branches, all analyzing the battle from various angles. The tactical decisions were sound, Colonel Patricia Barnes said, showing holographic displays of the fight. Morrison identified the threat, assessed what he could do, and executed a high-risk rescue. Everything was by the book, assuming your book includes a chapter on completely crazy maneuvers. That is the part that concerns me, Hayes said. Morrison is not reckless. I have read his service record. He is actually known for careful planning and risk assessment, but when he saw that merchant ships surrounded, something else took over. It is called moral courage, sir, a younger officer suggested. He saw people in danger and did not hesitate. I know what it is called, Lieutenant, Hayes said. What concerns me is that every human officer in our fleet would probably do the same thing. We train our people to see impossible odds as just another day at work. That is good for morale and combat ability, but it is also how we end up in wars we did not plan for. Barnes showed a star chart with human space and the surrounding sectors. Sir, we have 17 patrol craft covering areas that other species think are impossible to defend. We operate on the assumption that our people will figure things out and overcome whatever they face. So far that has worked, but the Morrison incident changed things. Now everyone knows what one of our patrol officers can do. They will start planning for that. Hayes nodded slowly, which means our people will need to get even better, and the cycle continues. He stood up and looked at the assembled officers. Here is the reality. We are the new kids in a very old and very dangerous galaxy. We do not have time to build slowly or learn gradually. Every action we take is being watched and judged. Morrison earned us respect from species that value courage and strength, but he also painted a target on our backs for anyone who sees us as a threat. What are your orders, sir? Barnes asked. We do what humans do best, Hayes said with a slight smile. We prepare for the worst, hope for the best, and train our people to handle whatever comes their way. And we make sure every officer understands what Morrison understood. Out here, we are not just representing ourselves. We represent our entire species. Every action matters. On Station Kepler 7, Zeltis received a message from the Zilari Merchant Collective. They wanted him to testify at a Galactic Trade Commission, hearing about piracy in the outer sectors. His encounter with Morrison would be used as a case study for why stronger anti-piracy measures were needed. But the second message was more interesting. It came through a private channel, and was an invitation to join a new business venture. A merchant fleet would operate under human protection in exchange for favorable trade agreements. Humans needed resources and goods from across the galaxy. Merchants needed protection from pirates and raiders. It was a simple trade, but one that could reshape how galactic business worked. Zeltis thought about Morrison's words. Pay it forward. Help someone else when they need it. The human had not just saved one ship that day. He had started something much bigger, and the galaxy was still trying to figure out what that meant. In the following weeks, more human patrol craft appeared in the outer sectors. They were not invading or claiming territory. They were simply there, watching and protecting. When pirates attacked merchant vessels, humans responded. Sometimes they won easily. Sometimes the fights were difficult. But they always responded. The pattern became clear. Humans were establishing themselves as protectors of civilian trade. They were not asking for payment or demanding territory. They just showed up when needed and did what had to be done. This confused many species. In galactic history, military power was always used for conquest or profit. Species built fleets to expand their territory or force favorable trade terms. But humans seemed to be using their military simply to help others. It did not make sense according to traditional political thinking, but it made perfect sense to the merchants and civilians who benefited from human protection. Trade routes that had been abandoned due to piracy were opening again. Goods were flowing between sectors that had been cut off for years. Economic activity was increasing in regions that had been stagnant for decades. The established powers watched all this with growing unease. Change was always uncomfortable, especially for those who benefited from the old system. Some species had grown wealthy by controlling dangerous trade routes and charging high prices for protection. Now humans were offering better protection for less cost. Political analysts across the galaxy tried to figure out the human strategy. What were they really after? What was their end game? The answer seemed too simple to believe. Maybe humans really did just want to help. Maybe they really did see protecting the weak as its own reward. For species raised on centuries of calculating self-interest, this was a difficult concept to accept. But the evidence kept mounting. Every human action supported the same pattern. They helped when help was needed. They fought when fighting was necessary. They asked for nothing except fair trade and mutual respect. The galaxy was learning a new lesson. Humanity had arrived and they were playing by different rules. Whether the rest of the galaxy liked it or not, things were changing. 6 months had passed since Commander Jake Morrison fought the Kragath hunters. The galaxy had changed in ways both obvious and subtle. Trade routes were safer. Piracy was declining in sectors where human patrols operated. Merchant traffic was increasing, bringing prosperity to regions that had suffered for decades. But not everyone was happy about these changes. On the Vershik homeworld, a race of calculating strategists who had spent centuries managing galactic power balances watched humanity's rise with deep concern. The Vershik did not fight wars themselves. They manipulated others into fighting wars that served Vershik interests. They were masters of political and economic control, working from the shadows. Senior analyst Prax stood before the Vershik Council, presenting his latest report. His gray skin was marked with the blue patterns that indicated deep thought and concern. The human disruption continues to accelerate. In less than 6 months, their intervention has shifted piracy patterns across 17 sectors. Merchant traffic is increasing in previously unstable regions. This creates economic changes that affect dozens of species. Is this a threat to us? Council leader Vex asked. That depends on perspective, Prax replied. For civilians and merchants, humanity is a stabilizing force. They bring safety and increased trade. For those who profit from instability and chaos, humans are a significant threat. For major powers used to the established order, they are an unpredictable variable. Explain further, Vex commanded. Prax activated a holographic display showing trade flow patterns before and after human intervention. Look at these sectors. Before humans arrived, the Kragath controlled these routes through intimidation. Merchants paid protection money to avoid being attacked. That money flowed to Kragath clan leaders, who used it to buy weapons from several major manufacturers. Those manufacturers are now losing business because piracy is declining. So humans are disrupting established economic relationships, another council member observed. More than that, Prax said. They are disrupting the power structure. For centuries, we have maintained stability through carefully balanced fear. The strong prey on the weak just enough to profit, but not enough to cause collapse. Humans are removing fear from the equation. They offer protection without demanding submission. This fundamentally changes how power works. The council sat in silence, considering the implications. Finally, Vex spoke. What is your recommendation? We watch and wait, Prax said carefully. Humans are still learning galactic politics. They are making allies among merchants and smaller species, but they are also making enemies among those who benefit from the current system. Eventually, they will face a challenge that cannot be solved with courage and creative tactics. How they handle that will determine their long-term role. And if they succeed? Vex asked. Then we adapt to a galaxy where humans are a major power, Prax replied. One that operates on principles very different from what we are used to. Far across space on Earth in the Federation Council chambers, debates about humanity's galactic role continued. Some argued for rapid expansion and a more aggressive approach. Others wanted caution and careful diplomacy. Ambassador Linda Carter stood before the council, presenting her analysis of the situation. We have been given a gift, she told the assembled leaders. Commander Morrison's actions bought us credibility and respect, but it also set a standard. Every human who goes into space now carries the weight of that standard. We are expected to be brave, capable, and morally upright. That is not a burden. That is an opportunity. An opportunity for what? Council member Greg Foster asked. To show the galaxy what humanity can be, Linda replied. Not conquerors or overlords, not isolationists hiding in our corner of space, but partners and protectors. Species that stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. That is a role no one else is filling right now. It is also expensive, another council member pointed out. We are spending significant resources protecting trade routes that generate no direct revenue for us. How long can we sustain this? Longer than you think, Linda said. Yes, we spend resources on patrols. But look at what we gain. We are building relationships with merchant guilds across dozens of sectors. We are earning goodwill with smaller species who have been victims of piracy for generations. We are establishing humanity as a force for stability and justice. You cannot put a price on that kind of reputation. Some species see us as a threat, Foster noted. Let them, Linda replied. We are a threat to pirates, slavers, and anyone who preys on the weak. If that makes us enemies of certain powers, then those were never going to be our friends anyway. Better to be feared by predators than ignored by everyone. The council debated for hours, but ultimately they voted to continue the current policy. Human patrol craft would keep protecting civilian trade throughout the sectors adjacent to Federation space. The policy would be reviewed annually, but for now, humanity was committed to being the galaxy's protector. On Station Kepler 7, the protected merchant fleet had grown to over 100 vessels. Ships from dozens of species now traveled together under human escort. Zeltis served as the fleet coordinator, managing schedules and routes. It was demanding work, but deeply satisfying. One day, a Kragath merchant approached him in the station corridor. Not a warrior or hunter, but an actual trader trying to do honest business. The Kragath shell clicked nervously as it spoke. Your human friend saved my ship last month, the Kragath said quietly. Different patrol officer, but same courage. Same commitment. They fought off raiders from my own species to protect me. Tell your human friends they are changing things. Not everyone is happy, but they are making the galaxy safer. This conversation represented something significant. Even among the Kragath, traditionally the most aggressive pirates in the galaxy, some were choosing a different path. Humans had shown that trade and cooperation could be more profitable than piracy and violence. The lesson was spreading, but not everyone was learning that lesson. In the shadows of the galaxy, powerful interests were organizing. Species that profited from chaos were forming alliances. Weapons manufacturers who sold to pirates were funding political movements. Criminal organizations were pooling resources. They all recognized humans as a threat to their way of life, and they were planning to do something about it. Captain Helen Cruz of the patrol vessel Guardian detected the first signs of this organized response. She was investigating reports of unusual ship movements in a supposedly quiet sector when her sensors picked up a massive energy signature. Not one or two ships, but dozens. All patrol vessels, this is Guardian, Helen broadcast on the emergency frequency. I have contact with a large hostile fleet. At least 30 ships, mixed classes, unknown allegiance. They are blocking the main trade route through this sector, requesting immediate backup. The response came quickly, but not from other human ships. It came from the fleet itself. A voice speaking in heavily accented galactic standard said, Human vessel, you have interfered with galactic affairs for the last time. This fleet represents species from across multiple sectors. We are here to teach you a lesson. Humans are not welcome as protectors. Leave now or be destroyed. Helen checked her scanners again, 30 ships against her single patrol craft. The smart move would be to retreat and wait for reinforcements. The logical choice was to preserve her ship and crew for another day. But between her position and the hostile fleet, 6 civilian merchant vessels were trying desperately to maneuver away from danger. They were slow, unarmed, and completely vulnerable. If she retreated, they would be destroyed. Helen thought about Commander Morrison and his decision 6 months ago. She thought about the standard he had set, and the expectations that came with wearing a human uniform. She thought about the promise Ambassador Carter had made to the galaxy. All civilian vessels, this is Guardian, she broadcast calmly. Continue your current heading. I will cover your withdrawal. Her crew looked at her with a mixture of fear and pride. They knew the odds. They knew what she was asking of them. But they also knew their duty. Helen powered up her weapons and accelerated toward the hostile fleet. As she did, she activated her personal music playlist. Hard rock with a driving beat filled the bridge. Her crew smiled despite their fear. Let us show them what humans do, Helen said quietly. We keep our promises. The Guardian dove into battle alone, 1 ship against 30. But this time the galaxy was watching, and humanity's real test was just beginning. Captain Helen Cruz knew the mathematics of the situation. 30 ships against 1 meant certain death. Her patrol vessel Guardian was tough and well-armed, but it could not possibly survive against those odds. Yet she did not hesitate. 6 civilian ships needed time to escape, and she was going to give them that time no matter the cost. The hostile fleet spread out into an attack formation. They had ships from at least 8 different species, all united by their hatred of human interference. Some were former pirates angry about lost profits. Others were mercenaries hired by those who benefited from galactic chaos. A few were representatives of powers that saw humanity as a threat to the established order. Helen targeted the nearest ship and opened fire. Her weapons tore through its shields and hull in seconds. The vessel exploded in a brilliant flash, debris spinning away into the darkness. But 29 ships remained, and they were all targeting her now. Plasma bolts and missiles filled the space around the Guardian. Helen threw her ship into a violent series of evasive maneuvers, pushing her engines and her crew to their limits. She returned fire whenever possible, her point defense systems working overtime to intercept incoming missiles. "Status," she called out to her crew. "Shields at 60% and falling," her tactical officer reported. "We have taken hits to sections 4 and 7. Life support is stable, but we cannot take much more." Helen checked the tactical display. The civilian ships were almost clear. Just 30 more seconds and they would be able to jump to faster than light speed. 30 seconds might as well be 30 years in combat like this. "All power to forward shields," she ordered. "Angle us between the fleet and the civilians. Make us the only target they can shoot at." Her helmsman executed the maneuver perfectly. The Guardian positioned itself as a barrier, taking hit after hit meant for the defenseless merchant ships. Alarms screamed across the bridge as systems failed. The shield display showed red across half the ship. Then something unexpected happened. More ships dropped out of faster than light speed. Not hostile vessels, but 3 other human patrol craft responding to Helen's distress call. They immediately joined the battle, their weapons adding to the defensive fire. The odds were still terrible, but now it was 4 human ships against 30 instead of 1 against 30. "Guardian, this is Defender," a voice called over the communication channel. "We are with you. Let us make them regret this." The 4 human ships fought with the same fierce determination that had become their trademark. They refused to give ground even when wounded. They covered each other with precise teamwork developed through countless training exercises. They made every shot count and every maneuver matter. The hostile fleet had expected an easy victory. They had expected the humans to retreat or surrender when faced with overwhelming force. Instead, they found themselves in a real fight against an enemy that simply would not quit. 2 more hostile ships exploded under concentrated human fire. A third lost power and began drifting helplessly. But the human ships were taking serious damage too. Guardian's shields were gone completely. Defender had lost half its weapons. The other 2 ships were venting atmosphere from multiple hull breaches. Then the civilian merchant ships completed their jump to safety. The mission was accomplished. The people they had sworn to protect were safe. "All human vessels, this is Guardian," Helen broadcast. "Mission complete. All ships are authorized to withdraw." But before they could begin their retreat, something else happened. The civilian ships that had just escaped dropped back out of faster than light speed, not to rejoin the battle, but to broadcast a message across all frequencies. "Attention all ships." Zelthus's voice rang out clearly. "This is Captain Zelthus of the merchant vessel Bright Hope. We are calling for help on behalf of the human ships that protected us. Any friendly vessels in range, the humans need assistance." Within minutes, more ships began arriving. Merchant vessels that carried light weapons for self-defense. A ground military patrol that had been nearby. Even a few independent traders who had been helped by humans in the past. None of them were major warships, but together they represented a significant force. The hostile fleet found itself facing not just 4 human ships, but over 20 vessels of various types, all united by a single purpose. They were there to help the humans who had helped them. The tide of battle turned. The hostile fleet, which had gathered to teach humans a lesson, found themselves learning a different lesson instead. They were learning that humanity had earned something precious in the galaxy. They had earned loyalty and friendship. Faced with this unexpected resistance, the hostile fleet began to break apart. Some ships fled immediately. Others tried to fight on but were quickly overwhelmed. Within an hour, the battle was over. The hostile fleet had been scattered, with multiple ships destroyed or captured. Helen sat in her damaged captain's chair, hardly able to believe what had just happened. They had been saved not by human reinforcements, but by the very people they had sworn to protect. The civilians had come back to help them. Zeltis's voice came over the private channel. Commander Cruz, you told us to pay it forward. You told us to help others when they need it. Today you needed help. We could not do anything less. Helen felt tears in her eyes. Thank you, Zeltis. You saved our lives. No, Zeltis replied gently. You saved ours months ago. Today we simply returned the favor. That is what friends do. The aftermath of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than light speed. News of the engagement reached every corner of civilized space within days. The story was clear and powerful. Humans had risked everything to protect civilians. And when humans needed help, those same civilians had risked everything to return the favor. On the Vershik homeworld, analyst Prax updated his report to the Council. The situation has evolved beyond our predictions. Humanity has not just established military credibility. They have built genuine relationships based on mutual aid and respect. This is unprecedented in modern galactic history. Recommendation? Council Leader Vex asked. We stop trying to predict what humans will do based on traditional power calculations, Prax said. They operate on different principles. Instead of trying to manipulate or contain them, we should consider working with them. The galaxy they are building may actually be better than the one we have maintained. On Earth, Admiral Frank Hayes stood before the Federation Council with a new proposal. We need to expand our patrol fleet, not for conquest or territory, but to meet the demand for protection. Dozens of merchant guilds are requesting human escorts. Civilian governments are asking for our help against piracy and raiders. We have created something here and we need to sustain it. The Council approved his proposal unanimously. More ships would be built. More officers would be trained. Humanity was committing itself fully to its new role as protector and partner. Commander Jake Morrison, whose actions had started this entire chain of events, received orders to report to the Naval Academy once again. This time not to speak to graduating cadets, but to help design the new training program for patrol officers. His expertise would help shape the next generation of human defenders. As Jake walked through the academy halls, young officers stopped to salute him. They looked at him with respect and admiration. He found it uncomfortable, but he understood it. He represented something important to them. He represented the standard they were all trying to meet. In his office, Jake reviewed the latest reports from across the galaxy. Human patrol craft were operating in dozens of sectors now. They were not winning every battle. Some officers had died protecting civilians, but they were making a difference. Trade was increasing.
Piracy was declining.
People felt safer. He thought about that day in the asteroid field when he had decided to engage 5 enemy ships. It had seemed like a simple choice at the time. People needed help, so he helped them. He had not thought about the consequences or the implications. He had just done what felt right. Now that simple choice had changed the galaxy. Not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through consistency and commitment. Humans kept their promises. They protected those who needed protection. They stood up for what was right even when it was difficult. Other species were starting to understand what that meant. They were learning that humans could be trusted. That human friendship was real and lasting. That human promises were not empty words but genuine commitments. The galaxy was changing because one species had decided to be different, to value courage over caution, to choose action over calculation, to believe that protecting the weak was not just smart policy, but moral obligation. Jake Morrison looked out at the stars beyond his window. Humanity had been exploring space for only 30 years. They were still the new kids in a galaxy billions of years old, but they were making their mark in ways that mattered. They were building something better. One ship at a time, one rescue at a time, one promise kept at a time, and the galaxy was watching with a mixture of wonder and hope, realizing that maybe, just maybe, these strange humans from Earth were exactly what everyone had been waiting for. Someone brave enough to fight for what was right, someone strong enough to protect the weak, someone committed enough to keep their promises no matter the cost. The age of predators was ending. The age of protectors was beginning.